Let's bring in Dr. Michael Eric Dyson, one of the nation's leading public intellectuals, currently the Centennial Chair in African American and Diaspora Studies at Vanderbilt University. Dr. Dyson, thank you for being here.
Thank you for having me.
Are you surprised and shocked by the results of the November 5th presidential election, which was touted prior to November 5th as a consequential election? And many people were expecting that, in fact, Kamala Harris, Vice President Kamala Harris, would assume the presidency.
I am quite surprised and deeply disappointed, not because I'm naive. I'm a veteran of these political wars and these electoral battles.
Right.
But not simply relying on the polls, which had it far closer. And it was an up and down. Right. First, Trump was ahead in the swing states. And then after when Biden was on the top of the ticket, and then when Kamala Harris got on the top of the ticket, then, she had momentum as well, especially after the debate where she basically eviscerated Donald Trump. But that shows us the regular metrics to determine an outcome of an election. Right. Who's more capable, who's more fit, who's able to articulate their vision, who's able to persuade people that their understanding of the world is one that is both compelling and, of course, consonant with the history of the best struggles for political vision and leadership within the context of American democracy. All that out the window. Donald Trump is a unique candidate, mostly in negative ways. And regardless of his fit for office or not, his incompetence or not, his inability to speak a coherent sentence or not, the fact is that these elements that fostered his rise certainly supported him sufficiently. Thank God we've waited for the vote count to be completed, and it is being completed. He's less than 50% of the popular vote, so he has no mandate to go out here and do some of the things he's doing. But I was deeply disappointed because I think Kamala Harris is manifestly superior in every measure in terms of political experience, from an attorney general to a state's attorney, to Attorney General of California, to the United States Senate, a senator from California, and then Vice President of the United States of America. I mean, her vast experience from which she draws such serious insight about the nature of governing, how we should provide opportunities and possibilities for the American voter, and figuring out ways to address the prevailing crises that we confront. On every measure, in every metric, she was manifestly superior, but still didn't get enough votes for her to become, especially in swing states, to become the president. So I am deeply disappointed. I'm disappointed because, look, Black women always show up, and they showed up in the 90th percentile, so we know that their game is tight. Even Black men, 77%. It's not what was tracking with either Biden or Obama, but still the second demographic that supported her, the second highest demographic that supported her. Now, when it comes to white women, what in the world, right? We think that, 50-some percent, 3, 4, 5% of white women who are eligible voters voted against Kamala Harris and for Donald Trump. We figured white men would be in his corner. The surprising numbers of Black men who came out and supported, again, though, even as the reality is that Black men didn't support at the highest levels that we have historically done in recent elections, still enough to have gotten Kamala Harris the second, most votes in, the demographic. So my point is that, and among Latinos, the 53, 54% for Trump is astonishing. But when you disaggregate the data, it's not really the Venezuelans or the Puerto Ricans who are going en masse, though enough, but it was really Cubans who did disproportionate numbers there. So when you disaggregate the data and look at it, it still doesn't make sense for the interests that we think Kamala Harris so ably represents. And we know, since we're in Michigan right now, you, of course, are a legendary Michigan journalist, and I'm a native of Detroit, that our Arab brothers and sisters and our Middle Eastern brothers and sisters and those who were outraged, as they should have been, by the outcome of Gaza. It's one thing for Israel to defend itself. I think no one has a problem with that after you've been savagely attacked. But the murderous and genocidal response, all out of proportion to what the offense that instigated their response is also to be acknowledged. And Netanyahu is a horrible, horrible leader of Israel. But we couldn't convince enough of our Middle Eastern brothers and sisters to say that this is a game of politics, however, and strategy. And if you think Donald Trump is going to be even more committed to you, even more committed to bringing peace to the Middle East, they've already written letters. We're so disappointed. We wanted to say to them, there's a bit of political naivete involved there, because in America, you've got to play a longer game than what might happen in other regions of the world, where the discontent with a particular political outcome means that you go all in protest against a particular candidate without having to calculate who the successor would be and what policies might be put in place. I think Middle Eastern and, Arab brothers and sisters are in far worse shape today than they would have been had Kamala Harris become president, because she had already indicated, I'm not going to meet with Netanyahu. I'm not going to do business as usual. And I think they weren't able to accept or pick up on the political implications that she was certainly giving off.
So let me put it in simple vernacular. Do you feel that the Arab American community, who overwhelmingly, in an unprecedented way, voted for Donald Trump, were playing checkers, not chess?
Oh, yeah, they were certainly playing checkers. I mean, yes. Because the long game, the chess game, would be whoever gets in next that we're most likely to influence, have some cogent argument made so that the end that we seek, which is peace in the Middle East, which is Gaza, a ceasefire in the Middle East, all right, without the previous, America says the reason it is the only nation that voted against ceasefire is because there was no guarantee of the release of hostages before the ceasefire was put forth. As if we couldn't have a ceasefire and then the peaceful return of these hostages. So America thinks it's playing hardball, and it's actually, inflaming the tensions worse. But yes, I would suggest to my Arab brothers and sisters and my Middle Eastern brothers and sisters, you're playing checkers in terms of immediate gratification for the acknowledgement, the undeniably legitimate and valid and authentic expression of support for the Middle East. But now you got a guy who doesn't care. He's calling people who criticize Israel Jew haters. Do you think that this president is more sympathetic to either Joe Biden or certainly to Kamala Harris, who was able to distinguish herself even from Joe Biden? Yes, she continued to support Israel in its defense of itself, but she'd already given very serious signs that a new day was coming with a new sheriff in town. And yes, the checkers over chess, I think, is a tragic misplay. And as one of the representatives of those who overwhelmingly voted for Donald Trump said, we've been played. We've been there, done that. We tried to suggest that would be the outcome. Unfortunately and tragically, they weren't able to absorb that lesson.
So let me ask you this. I want to peel the onion a little bit back to the white women vote. We were expecting, and I think you'll agree with that white women who voted for Donald Trump in 2016 will redeem themselves with a vote for Vice President Harris in 2024.
No doubt.
Given that Hillary Clinton, a highly accomplished woman, served in public service at the highest levels and was a standard bearer in the feminist movement or in the modern feminist movement. She didn't get the white women's support. And so a lot of people were expecting, I was expecting that white women would redeem themselves with Vice President Kamala Harris. And talk about the irony of that, though.
Yeah. You make a very important point. And not only all of what you said is true, but in light of Dobbs, in light of Roe versus Wade being repealed, This is the first national election in the aftermath of a Supreme Court stacked, by the way, by Donald Trump. 3 Supreme Court justices swayed it even further to the right, pushed it further to the extremes, that gave Donald Trump a legislative, because he got the Senate and Congress, and jurisprudential, a judicial support for his beliefs. This is the time for white women to step up and go, no, this is not the time for us to deny bodily autonomy. For even if we are raped, to have to be forced in many states to carry the baby to term, that these white men overwhelmingly who are making passing judgment on our bodies are not fit for service, so to speak. And yet, against their own best interests, if we're talking about Arab brothers and sisters, then what game are white women playing? It is not checkers or chess. It might be Pinocchio, with their pinochle or whatever they call it, some other game, Tonk or 500 in game. You're not even playing a significant and serious game to strategize for the collective interests of women. Now, what it does say when we disaggregate that data, right, Black women overwhelmingly went for Kamala Harris, white women didn't. So that this notion of an ostensible collective, a feminist, if you will, coalition generated out of the context of white women and Black women, that don't exist. And if it does, it's a very narrow ledge upon which to stand. And it doesn't seem to have a significant difference or play a significant difference in the broader voter. Yes, we know in self-selected slices of the demographics where progressive white women or liberal white women may have sided more with Kamala than Donald Trump, the numbers just don't tell that story. They didn't show up to vote. African-American people in numbers that would have made a difference didn't vote, stayed home. Women voted in a way that was counterproductive to their interests, and some of them stayed home. So we can look at, this is not a mandate of Donald Trump. This is an indictment, once again, of the failure to see the ballot box as a strategic means to really argue for the future of this nation. Now, it goes both ways. Part of voter suppression has been successful. Some young Black people thinking, it didn't make a difference. You're self-suppressing. You are suppressing the vote yourself by you having a kind of cynicism, which is understandable, a kind of frustration with the political movements that have not delivered for you. It's understandable that they don't see the long game. They're young people, forget it. But it encourages you to engage in activity that is counterproductive to your own best interests. And so we've got to figure out ways to not only strengthen that coalition, but to also talk about the political outcomes of elections that have consequences that pay not only immediately, but down the road. If Donald Trump had failed to get back into office, he would have still had an important and significant impact upon national public policy, legal precedent, and legislative agendas, but especially through the legal precedent, because the Supreme Court is so far right-wing and extreme that it continues to deliver decisions that are counterproductive to the best interests of democracy from those of us who sit to the left.
We've seen universities reporting their affirmative action numbers. Black enrollment has been going down at the Ivy League schools, something that you know about. But you've been talking about Trump America, how we survive in this era. A lot of people are in a state of fear. They don't know what is going to happen in 2025. Sure. I'm curious, though, in terms of what would you say to those who are in a state of apprehension and don't know what to do right now come January?
No, it's a great question. Look, as I tried to suggest this week, and the Reverend Dr. Freddie Haynes tried to suggest, as my pastor, Dr. Frederick Sampson, said, we've already come through what we've come to. It's hard for us to believe in the moment of such nihilistic repudiation of the best political outcome of this election and the best political vision that would prevail, that America seemed to reject. This ain't the first time they rejected it. This is not the first time America has made moves and gone in directions that are counterproductive to the interests of vulnerable citizens, of minoritized populations, and of men, of women and African-American people and others. So we got to go back and look at that history. We got to look at the fact that after Reconstruction, this kind of stuff happened, right? We had Reconstruction for 12 years. Nope, we ain't going to do that. So now we give reparation to white slave owners who lost their labor because enslaved people were freed. Then sharecropping was a horrible indentured servitude, so to speak, slavery by another name, as has been suggested. And we've had political outcomes that have been deleterious, that have been destructive to African-American interests, but we made it through. We kept going. And not only political outcomes of elections, but social and public policies that have been destructive to African-American people. We fought through it. We fought through the Moynihan Report. We fought through welfare policy. We fought through the inability to recognize the humanity of Black people by lynching, castration, rape, and murder, the kind of mayhem that was not legally resolved. So we have faced harder and harsher conditions, though it's hard to imagine that we had also in place a president who was so fundamentally hostile to the interests of democracy that he himself was an agent, a foreign agent, it seems, if not in country in terms of foreign ideals within the democratic, small d, establishment, where a president was not party to fomenting an insurrection as this soon-to-be next president, future president, who was an ex-president, did in 2020. So we confront a dire circumstance. I don't deny that, but we have to remember our history. And because we have gotten over before, we've got to remember we can do it once again.
And that leads me to the question of, and I've been asking this question, the juxtaposition of Donald Trump being sworn in, and at the same time, the observance of the nation's premier peace officer, Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., the 20th century's greatest civil rights leader. Talk about that juxtaposition, though. There's I don't know what word to use, oxymoron, paradox, irony.
Yeah, all of that. Enigma,
right.
Conundrum,
right.
A damn shame. There's a jarring juxtaposition between, as you said, the ultimate symbol of peace, a man who I consider to be the greatest American who ever lived, more than Lincoln even. Lincoln was a great, great man and gave his life in service to his nation as president, but so did Dr. King. But he did it without political support. He did it without the office that Abraham Lincoln occupied. He did it as a private citizen. And in shedding blood into the soil of American society, from that sprouted such deep and profound commitments to ideals that were rejected when he was living. But his martyrdom and the aftermath of his surrender and sacrifice of life created opportunity for America to shift in a profound fashion. So when you got that on the one hand, juxtaposed to a man who has done everything the opposite, hostile to democracy, undercutting, senses of the sense of all of us as Americans, his xenophobia, excuse me, against foreign folk, against folk who are immigrants, though his wife is one, immigrants who have arrived here from the late 1800s to early 1900s, in the first wave of immigration, Jews, Poles, Italian, Irish, now with Central and South America being dominant, and from some of the African diaspora and in the Caribbean and from Africa itself, there's all of a sudden a deep and profound disavowal of the legitimacy and the beauty and the power and the attraction and the desirability of having these immigrants constitute this nation. With his pledge to start with Springfield, Ohio, in purging en masse, those who are immigrants to this nation, though they are here legally, is a sign of a demented, psychotic, and sick impulse in a human being who has the levers of power at his disposal, which is why we must continue to do what the other man suggested. We got to fight against it. We can't take it lying down. We can't be victims. Oh my God, what will we do? Yes, it's time to regroup. Yes, it's time to be angry. Yes, it's time to be hurt. Yes, it's time to grieve. But after that grieving period, we have got to stand up to tell the truth about what we believe this nation is and fight as vigorously as the other side does for its vision, for our understanding of what true democracy is.
And within that fight itself, how do Black people find agency to survive the Trump?
That's a great question. Well, it's the old-fashioned way. Political agency is still viable, though the outcome of this election is not what we wanted. People go, oh my God. Remember, there are more, there's election presidential every 4 years, right? There's a midterm election coming up in 2 years. And we know often the political party that is in power is rejected and rebuffed at the ballot box because they can't deliver what they promised anyhow. Either side, let's be real. But some sides are better than others. Some sides more closely approximate what they promised than others. Excuse me, there's no way that Donald Trump can achieve some of the nefarious, outrageous, ridiculous, and anti-democratic, small d, goals that he has in mind without an outcry, without a resistance. And how we claim agency is standing up, speaking up. Now, it's not posting on X, or if you leave that and go to fan base and whatever else, or the blue site that's being generated. It's not, excuse me. It's not just you posting, although that's important. It's not just talking on Instagram, though that's important. Do something, as Michelle Obama said. Join a local organization, join National Action Network, join the NAACP, join the National Urban League, join the Lawyers Roundtable. You're right, there are many organizations that are pre-existing, that already exist. We ain't got to reinvent the wheel, that are committed to any interest you have in terms of women's rights, in terms of bodily autonomy, National Organization of Women, many feminist groups, Black women's groups. We got enough groups. The question is, where are the people who understand them as a vehicle for expression of agency? So we ain't got to invent the wheel or reinvent the wheel. We've got to take hold of that wheel and express our interests and desires.
And two more questions, Dr. Dyson. Do you feel that the Democratic Party needs to do a self-introspection in the wake of this defeat?
Look, had we won, it'd be a whole different thing. So let's slow down with the autopsies. Let's do a biopsy. let's look at the cancerous cells that we have and address them. What did we do wrong, right? When we say, oh, well, we didn't appeal to the white working class, you may never get them back. LBJ, not LeBron James, y'all, but Lyndon Baines Johnson said when he signed that legislation, that historic legislation in the mid-1960s, we may have lost the South, he said, for a generation, 30 years. Bro, it's been a lot longer than that, because the white South perceived itself as white. And perceiving itself as white meant that it had the original option of democracy, that it had the ultimate option of democracy, that it had the primary option of democracy. Forget women, forget minoritized populations, African Americans, Latinos, indigenous folk, Pan-Asian, Pacific Rim, Asian folk, all that. No, it is about whiteness. So we have to accept that. The white working class has never been the avatar of a progressive movement. Unions are critical and important, but we have often had to fight the white working class for room, right? See, rich white people create policies. Yes, let Black people do this. Let's do this. Let's be progressive, because they ain't got to live with the consequences of it. They don't live next door to African Americans and Latinos who will live out the consequences of public policies made by white folk who ain't got to live next door to them. Now, thank God that they do, but the ones who live next door, are fighting for scarcer resources they perceive, and what they perceive is their piece of the pie. And it's a zero-sum game to them. If they get something, we lose out. That kind of thinking is counterproductive, but we've got to hit, yes, we have needed introspection, but why we need to challenge the white working class more, why we need to challenge white elites more, instead of giving in to the horrible inclination for white working class not to see its interest tied with us. So let's not capitulate to a dead end. Let's open up a new avenue for rethinking who we are as a nation. So yes, let's do a biopsy and not an autopsy.
Do we need a biopsy for the white church as well?
Oh my God. Don't get me started, brother. Yes, we do. White Christian nationalism is horrible.
You are a theologian, so I might as well put the question to you.
Yes, sir. Well, I think about theology a lot. I'm an ethicist within Christian thought as well, and I'm trying to figure out what in the world's going on here. But white Christian nationalism is counterproductive to who we are as a nation. White Christian nationalism is the very thing that has marred and, in a dismaying way, derailed our quest for true democracy. So again, let's not ask how we can gain more of these Christians. Let's ask Christians who do exist, who have a different viewpoint, to stand up and speak. So for me, again, yes, we need to do a biopsy there in the collective religious body and see what cancerous cells are there. And instead of trying to encourage them to proliferate, let's get rid of them. I don't mean get rid of literally white Christians, but get rid of their ideology. I don't mean get rid of white working class people, but get rid of the horrible inclinations that exist that undermine our capacity to forge connection. It is whiteness that is the destructive barrier that the Democratic Party has to have enough courage to confront.
Well, the final question, Dr. Dyson, goes back to the immortal title of Dr. King's last testament. Where do we go from here? Chaos or community? I think it's a fitting question for where we are. Where do you see us going here?
Well, look, as bad as it looks, it's been worse. As bad as it looks, it's going to get better. Howard Thurman, the great mystic, said, I'm paraphrasing, refuse the temptation to scale down your dreams, hopes, and aspirations to the immediate event you confront. He said, either you're going to be a prisoner of the event or you're going to be a prisoner of hope. I choose to be a prisoner of hope. I know some, insightful and intelligent Black political scientists have said we're hope addicts. He meant that negatively. I mean it positively. I'm an addict of hope because that drug, that hope, has delivered us far more than cynicism will ever do, far more than a so-called realism will ever achieve. So for me, I think it's extremely important for us to examine who and what we are and to take stock of what we need to do in order to reach the best outcome of not only an election, but the best quest for justice that we see. This is why America has been often best understood as an experiment in democracy. And it's our time to experiment with it, and let's take it further than it's ever been before.
So we all must become prisoners of hope.
Prisoners of hope, my friend.
All right. The one and only Dr. Michael Eric Dyson, our nation's leading public intellectual. Thank you so much for being here.
Thanks for having me, man. Keep up the great work. You're an amazing guy.
Thank you.